Ready to go, ticking like a bomb that's about to blow. It's taking control, pulling at your feet like an undertow. You don't really know if you're all that capable, but you've been told to figure it out. Don't pretend you're stupid, sort it out. Go make yourself useful. You're better than dead. You really made a mess with the words you said. So easily fed, flames of the fire rise above your head. Welcome to streaming and screaming.
So welcome everyone to Streaming and Screaming! I am your host, David P. Cronmiller, and for the next hour we will be talking about all things streaming media, entertainment, and whatnot, because the whatnots do not get nearly enough attention. Yes. So this first inaugural episode, I thought it would be kind of a cool idea to talk about something that's near and dear to my heart. It's the 25-year anniversary of Saved by the Bell. I was on Saved by the Bell, the new class, for 3 seasons. I worked on the show for 3 years as an extra and as a bit player, and it's near and dear to my heart. So I thought, you know what, for the first episode, why don't we talk with the director of Saved by the Bell and Saved by the Bell, the new class. He also directed Benson and Mork and Mindy, Lewis Barnhart, so he'll be joining us and having a chat with us over the phone. And we'll also talk about some current events. There's just been this whole iCloud hack where J. Law has brought down the law on some hackers. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about this Lifetime movie about Bell. Yeah, and I'll share some stories from my time working on Saved by the Bell, the new class. Some little behind the scenes things that you may not know about the show. And then coming up in the weeks ahead, we're going to have some great guests, people like TJ Storm, Scott Mendelson, Henry Hanks, Cooper Barnes, among others. So let's get started. So let's talk with Lewis Barnhart. Here he is. So here's a short excerpt from an interview I did with Barnhart last year for my other show called I Went to Film School So You Don't Have to. These are unreleased excerpts about working with the kids on Saved by the Bell and some of the challenges. But stay tuned because I have Don again, a brand new interview with him here in a moment. He'll be joining us on the show to talk about Mork and Mindy and Robin Williams and Jonathan Winters and what it was like to work with them and also some other juicy tidbits about Saved by the Bell and other shows he's worked on. So stay tuned after these excerpts for some brand new stuff with Lewis Barnhart. So here we go. Here's an excerpt from my first interview with Lewis Barnhart from last year. So how did you get Saved by the Bell? How did you cross over into that show? How did you book that?
And when it came to pass, when I had the opportunity, Brandon Tartikoff, who's passed on now, great guy, very smart, and he and Peter came to the idea about doing Saved by the Bell, which is a spinoff of a show called Good Morning, Miss Bliss with Haley Mills. Haley went back to Disney and Peter Engel, and they came up with the idea about the Bell Show. So they gave us 7 shows to do, 5 of which I was the associate director still. And Peter came into my office one day, and he says, I have 2 slots open, show number 5 and show number 7. Which would you like? And I was stunned. I said, oh, well, I would like show number 5, because if it goes well, I'll get number 7. And he laughed, and he walked out the door, and sure enough, that's what happened. Then it was laid off for a while, went into hiatus period. Nobody knew what was going to happen. Nobody knew if it was going to be a success or not, and they picked it up for another 12 or 13, I can't remember. And I was the director on all of them, so there you go. And then it lasted another 8 seasons if you count the new class.
So working with kids, can be challenging, and you've worked with, obviously, when the show started on Bell, they were quite young, and they got older as the time went on, and then the new class came in, and we had, a young crop again. What's it like working with kids, and, do you find it very different than working with adults?
A routine I had to do. We had to be out by 6 o'clock on shoot day, which was Friday for us. Some shows have a different shoot days, but we had to be out by 6. And if we weren't, the teacher could come into the control booth and pull the show. Well, he never had to do that because we always got out after 8 seasons, over 200 shows. I think there was 1 or 2 times we went over But the rule was if you were already rolling, he would not pull the plug. But if you were not rolling, he had the opportunity to say, that's it, fellas. You got what you did during the daytime, but you're not going to get it now. He never did that. He was a nice guy, but he was firm, and he would say, I'd look around the corner of my arm, and my you encompass them. You bring them under your wing, and you collaborate with them, even on a simple shot. And the problems come, and of course the kids on our show were, I think the youngest was Dustin. He was 11 when we started, and he was the youngest, and the others were 12, 13, 14 years old. Most of them had to go to school, and the older ones didn't. And so they were taught right there on the set. We had a great teacher, and Sidney was his name. He was an older gentleman, but he knew television business. He knew how to do it, and he was very strict with the kids in the sense of, they had to get B's, or the state wouldn't let them act. He wouldn't let them work if they had low grades. So it was always a problem about getting their grades up and getting them to do their homework. Then as soon as the class was over, on a daily basis, except for a Friday shoot day, that was different. But on the regular days, they had to go to school, and then we had lunch, and they had to come running in, and then we had to rehearse the show. All right, well, then, it's a lot of pressure on the kids. It's a lot of anxiety, and you could see it in them. And then when they got to the set, they kind of breathed a sigh of relief, like, oh, boy, but then they got me. And I was the authority figure. I was the older guy that was the father. I was the uncle. I was the comedian. I was the guy that was a ball buster. I mean, I was, all those roles played a key part in how I wanted to deal with each actor. Some actors needed a verbal spank on the butt, and some of the actors knew exactly where I was going and what I was doing. I'm not sure that when we left the show, they all loved me because I had a routine I had to do. We had to be out by 6 o'clock on shoot day, which was Friday for us. Some shows have different shoot days, but we had to be out by 6. And if we weren't, the teacher could come into the control booth and pull the show. Well, he never had to do that because we always got out after 8 seasons, over 200 shows. I think there was 1 or 2 times we went over, but the rule was if you were already rolling, he would not pull the plug. But if you were not rolling, he had the opportunity to say, that's it, fellas. You got what you did during the daytime, but you're not going to get it now. He never did that. He was a nice guy, but he was firm, and he would say, I'd look around the corner of my arm, and in my peripheral vision, I could see him waiting, and the clock was going tick, 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 and it was heading to 6 o'clock. And as it before it got there, maybe 10, 15 seconds before, I would go, all right, cut, that's a wrap, send everybody home. And I would look at Sidney, and I would smile, and he would smile and nod his head and go. So we always had a time problem, and the pressure was immense. And I think the kids handled it very well. There were a couple that were not on the first round, but the second, the new class, we had some problems, and I think it all went back to great family life. So.
That's great. I mean, that seems like I like your approach that you really focus on the actor rather than necessarily everything else. And I've always appreciated that you had a general approach and you weren't necessarily going to make anybody feel bad when you gave them a note.
I'm not an angel, and I can say if I had to. See, my motto is I know who I am, I know what I am, and I need no comfort. That is my mantra. I know who I am, and during those days, I ticked off a lot of people, including technicians, because I would always come in, and I would try to figure out interesting ways to shoot it, interesting ways to act it, and it all comes from the script. That's the first line of everything. You gotta prepare this in your head, and you gotta know the script. You gotta know where the laughs are. You gotta know where the drama is, and you need to do that. And so there's a lot of things involved, but it always comes from the script. Then when you get there, Why do we have to run that camera from that set to that set? Why don't we stop in between? Because we have to be out at 6 o'clock, and I don't have time to do setups. So let's run that camera down to that set, come back with another camera, and I would use 2 or 3 sets at the same time and save a whole lot of time. But people objected to it because why? Some of the people, and I'm saying, on the technician side, sometimes are a little bit lazy and not wanting to run back and forth with pushing a camera or the boom mic or adjusting the floor cables, things like that. But, we got it done. We always got out on time.
So we're talking with Don Lewis Barnhart, the director of Saved by the Bell and Benson. He directed some Benson and Mork and Mindy. Don, thank you very much for joining us.
Well, thank you, David. I appreciate you having me on with you.
First off, I just want to talk about, we talked a lot about Bell in our old interview, and we covered a lot of bases on that, but we didn't really talk much about Mork and Mindy. Of course, recently Robin Williams passed, and not that long ago, Jonathan Winters passed. And I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about your experiences of working on Mork and Mindy. I watched one of your episodes last night. I watched the episode where Mork tries to stop a mugging by dressing up as an old woman.
It was a pretty good show. If you looked at it closely, you would see the forerunner of Mrs. Doubtfire, because he was dressed up as an older woman, and the show was called Old Muggable Mork.
Right.
And that was my first directing job on the Mork and Mindy show. Gary Marshall was nice enough to get me back on the show and become a director. His son, Scott Marshall, played the teenage boy, the Boy Scout.
Oh.
That got Robin across the street. That was the storyline. And so that was a pretty fun show. Gary Marshall did what he said he was going to do for me. He said that, I went to him in a certain period of time, and I asked him to be a director. I said I thought I had enough experience, and he said, I can't do that for you. You're an assistant director right now, and you go out and get yourself a job and come back and we'll talk. And so I gave a 2-week notice. Everybody gave me a big going away party. I went over to Benson and directed over there for my first network television show in 1980. And then I went back with the tape and I walked into Gary Marshall's office and I said, well, here it is. And he looked at me like, oh boy, now I got to come through with what I said I was going to do. And he did it. He was one of the nice guys in the business that actually did what he said he was going to do. So then I became a director, not for all of them, but I directed 5. And then the show went off the air. During that time, I think one other person did, but I was what I thought the only director that had the opportunity to direct Robin Williams and Jonathan Winters at the same time, no less. And I always thought that they taught me the world about comedy in the sense of what's important in the script and what's important in the ad-libbing side of it, the improv side. And Robin never really came out and said, Don, listen, I'm going to teach you something. But you could observe him and Jonathan and their styles of comedy. And boy, if you don't come out learning something about what I call the funny, then you shouldn't be in the business at all.
So you're basically your second directing gig was working with Robin Williams. That had to be kind of, because he doesn't stop. And that was like, I think the second or third season of the show by that point. What was that like, just, meeting him, working with him? What was that first experience like? Was it something you had to like catch up to him, or was it really symbiotic? How did that work?
Well, I worked with him for 4 years, and my directorial stuff came in the 4th year of the last season. That's when Jonathan Winters came aboard. And Robin was very, very respectful of the script. Everybody says he ad-libbed the whole show. He did not. But what he was allowed to do, and he took it and ran with it, was the abilities to say he's having a scene with Mindy. And they're doing a scene and there's an egg. And he starts doing a riff on the egg business. And he may do 5 minutes, minutes, 7 minutes, whatever. And the audience, of course, is what I call your pee in the pants audience. They were just, just going crazy watching him going and ad-libbing about the egg. Well, whatever else. And then in the editing room, you always had a camera on him and always had a camera on Pam, and she was wonderful. She was brilliant. And she was able to get his chemistry and react to it during the whole 5, 6, 7 minutes. And then in the editing room, you would take, because the storyline in a television show was only about 22 minutes, change. And so what they would do is the editor would go in there and they would take shots of Mindy and cut out some of the stuff that may or may not have worked in the egg business. You get my drift?
Yeah.
So at every show, they had that kind of routine where she was the person that bridged the gap of his ad-libbing. But he always respected the story, because you had to have a story. If you didn't have a story, you really don't have a show.
Yeah. And
he went with it, but he found ways to satisfy his need to ad-lib and be spontaneous.
So you also have to work with Winters and Williams together. Winters obviously was Robin Williams' sort of mentor and inspiration. I know they became good friends after Mork and Mindy or around that time. But what was it like to work with those two of those like whirling dervish comics?
Well, it was funny, David, because during the scenes, we'd do the scene and we'd get the scene, and then we'd have to change sets or clothes or whatever. And these two guys would go out and entertain the audience and just do a spontaneous riff on anything. And of course, the audiences were just screaming in laughter. And I went to the audio man and I said, one time I said, what we have to do is record this and then make an album. Well, I spoke to the wrong person, because the producers and the agents got involved and said, no, we can't do that. There's too much litigation problems and whatever.
That's a shame.
And so we didn't do it. But it would have been a wonderful comedy album to have those two guys ad-libbing, because most of that stuff was funnier than the actual script,
Bet.
So it was one of those kind of things. Where John was a whole different type of actor, comedian, and improvisational kind of a guy. He couldn't remember lines too well, so it had to be very gentle with John, and you had to go to John when he would muff a line and say, John, and you wouldn't do it, so people didn't hear you. You'd walk up to him and say, excuse me, John, I got to ask you to do this. And you would explain, the story needs that line. Oh, okay, John. And then you'd roll again, and then he'd muff it up, and then you'd, stop, and the audience was now starting to get wind of the fact that John, so you had to protect John, and you had to do things so that the audience didn't get wind of the fact that he had messed up. You try to protect your actors. From a directorial point of view, I always kept that in mind. No matter what show I was on, you had to, protect the actor. And if you want, I'll tell you a Benson story. But anyway, so you'd go to John and finally you'd get the line correct, and that would make the story work, and then you'd go on to the next piece of business. But I learned a lot from these guys, because there's two things that I found. There's a thing I found out, David, that there are two kinds of comedians. This is what I believe. One kind of comedian says funny things. The other comedian says things funny. And that's the kind of comedian that Robin and John and all these other ad-libby type and improvisational type comedians do. They say things funny. They walk in to a party. They don't tell jokes. The people that say funny things, they tell jokes, which is fine. I have nothing against that. But I learned the fact that if you're going to be funny, you better be funny if you're talking to a person or a tree. And that's what those guys did. And I learned a lot from them. So I give great thanks to those guys.
Yeah, it was a tragic, to hear about Williams' passing. What was he like, when he wasn't on? Because I'm assuming he wasn't on all the time, and there were moments where maybe you had a chance to get a sense of his own personality beyond just the comedy.
Yes, and it was very interesting, David, because and by the way, you're asking some nice questions. You're a good interviewer.
Thank you.
He would come in sometimes. He'd be out all night, He was this is not a secret, by the way. I mean, he admitted to the fact that he was using coke and Jack Daniels and whatever. And so I'm not telling stories out of school, and I would never ever fault him for whatever he did.
Yeah.
But we had to work with him. He would come in after being out at the Comedy Store or the Improv or someplace, and he would be working all night long. He'd come in with his hair askew, squinty eyes, and he'd have a couple of his people that were with him. And I remember one day he came in and he flopped down right on the couch, the Mindy couch in the living room, and he lay down there and went right to sleep. Of course, we were in rehearsal, and Howard Storm, who was the director in those days, who was a great guy and a great director, said, "Look, Don, just get the stand-ins to do the part, and then we'll wake him up and go forward." Fine. So we would rehearse the scene with the stand-in, and then we'd go to Robin and say, "Robin, it's time to get up." He'd get up slowly, but he'd get up, and then he knew his lines already because he was such a fast learner, and he would go out and he would see where the blocking was for the cameras and all that kind of stuff. And the stand-in would say, "Well, now you go here on that line, and you go here on that line, and on that line you cross around to the kitchen," and so forth. And then he did it. We got the blocking down. He'd go back and go back to sleep, and we go to the next scene. And this we did this any number of days, but it got through because on show night, or when we had rehearsals for the writers and the producers and so forth, he was brilliant. And when that so-called light goes on, man, he was fabulous no matter what kind of a day he had. So it was a great thing to watch. But yeah, he had down moments. The day that John Belushi died, or the night that he died, I guess, Robin came in and was instructed, because he was there, instructed not to say a word. Don't say anything. And he didn't. And then we went through the day, and of course the media was all surrounding, trying to get a statement out of Robin, but he clammed up. He did good. One funny story that I can tell, I was directing one of the episodes, and he was sitting in the living room in the chair with a robot, and Mindy was supposed to come down the stairs and then start the dialogue. So what happened? Called action, and Robin sat there, and Mindy comes in, and she goes, "Oh, Robin, listen, I wanted to," and Robin stood up, and he opened up his robe and flashed her. And she screamed, "Robin! Robin!" She ran back up the stairs, and of course the audience was hysterical. Now they didn't see him, without his clothes on, but he was naked to the bone. And then he would close it. Then he closed up his robe and sat down. And then it took us about 5, maybe 10 minutes to get everything settled down because everybody was screaming in laughter. And of course Pam Dauber, she took it well. And, we all came back and started over again. But yeah, he flashed a number of times.
Oh man, that must have been that sounds like an amazing experience to be able to work on that show and work with him and get a chance to see this.
Yeah, he was something else. He really was. Not only if you were smart, if a person was smart and worked with him on the show, you picked up a lot of good information without having to ask him.
Yeah.
You knew what he was doing if you were smart and you were interested in comedic acting. You were able to suck anything that he had that he was going to give out there free of charge. And that's what he did a lot of times. He would go out to these clubs and he would run around and be crazy and be wild, but he always left something. He never took anything. He always left something. And if you were smart, you could learn from him.
Well, what about Robert Guillaume working on Benson?
Well, he was a different kind of an actor. He was more of a I wouldn't say a method actor, but he was more of a very, very sophisticated and very intellectual. He didn't ad-lib a whole lot. He stuck to the script. He was a script person, and he was a story person. And when I got my first shot at directing him, this was in 1980, and I wanted to direct this thing and get it so I could take it back to Gary Marshall, as I already told you. So I'm there on the first day on the script of directing him, and the crew was around, some of the crew, and the script supervisor and some of the other actors, and we were just going through the first day of rehearsal. And, we were going here, and I said, Bob, if you could go over to this area here and do the line from that side of there and whatever. We talked about it. And he said, and he stopped me right in the middle of everything. And he said, now I hope can I say words on this?
Yeah, go ahead.
On this program?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Okay, well, it's the truth. That's what happened. So he said, Don, what are you going to do with your cameras? And he had a slight sneer in his voice. He wasn't a bad man, but he was sort of strict with the rules of how we were working. I said, Bob, fuck the cameras. I don't care about the cameras. I care about the story, and I care about you and the other actors to make the story work. I don't care about the cameras. Now, I had enough experience that I knew if I could just get them going into the right position, I knew where the cameras were already going to go. I had 4 of them. So I knew I could cover the scene, I could go through it, and nobody was going to know the difference. He said all these directors that come in and try to direct me always worry about the cameras. They never worry about the story. I said, well, Bob, I do. And he smiled at me. Not a big smile, but it's one of those smile wink jobbies that you get from a leading actor that says, fine, I trust you. Let's go on.
That's great. That's great. And you worked, you directed, I know you directed at least one episode. Did you direct any more than one for Benson?
I did. The deal was I went to Tony Thomas, who was Marlo Thomas's brother, who was Danny Thomas's son.
Right.
He was executive producer with Paul Witt. And they came off of Soap, the show called Soap.
Right.
And Robert Guillaume was assistant to the whatever.
Yeah.
I guess the mayor or the governor. Anyway, so I went to Tony when I left Mork Mindy show. When I went over to Benson and got the job there, the deal was I would AD, assistant direct, 5 shows, and if it went well, I would direct the 6th one.
Great.
And so that's what we did. I AD'd. I was around for 5 weeks. People knew me. I didn't try to, talk directing and all that kind of stuff. I left it alone, kept my mouth shut, learned a few things about, what's the right thing to do. And then when the time came for me to direct, it all was just like smooth. And when we got to that one line, what are you going to do with your cameras? Fuck the cameras, Bob. and the crew and around just about gagged, How dare you talk to Mr. Guillaume that way? That was the look that we're getting. And I got some laughs, too. So, all worked out. You take chances, you take a risk, and, he could have fired me right then. But he didn't.
I noticed on one of the episodes of Mork and Mindy you directed, and I wasn't able to watch this one last night. I do kind of remember it because I watched the show when I was younger. There was one episode, it was one of the ones, I think one of the last episodes, where I think Mork's having to go home or something. But I noticed in the cast list that Richard Mole and John Larroquette were both in that episode, along with Williams and Winters. Yeah, do you any interesting sort of hints at the fact that Richard Mole and John Larroquette, they go on to work on Night Court, and we all got to know them from that. What was it like to work with with those two? Was there anything that stood out to you?
Nothing in particular. I respected them as actors. They were top notch. They did their job, and everybody laughed, and they went home. I mean, it was pretty sterile.
Yeah.
There was laughter there and all that kind of stuff. The story worked, but I don't remember anything about them in particular.
That's okay.
I directed the one show that we blew up the set when they had to go back and the aliens were coming in to capture Robin, and take him home and all that kind of stuff. And I was in charge of blowing up that entire set. I don't know if you saw that show, but it was a pretty emotional thing because after 4 years of working in the same set, we rigged that thing so, of course, nobody got hurt. It wasn't real explosives, but it was all done with air and dirt and all kinds of stuff and furniture, spinning around and, then jumping behind the couch as this thing happened, and it was pretty wild.
That's crazy.
It was very emotional.
That must have been a heck of a shoot, very different from the other shoots you did for that show, I would bet.
Oh yeah, yeah. It was pretty wild. I enjoyed it though. I mean, like I say, there were forks in the road. I worked on the Beretta show with What's his name?
Right.
Huh? Just went out of my head.
Yeah, it's out of my head too. Robert something.
Yeah, Robert Blake.
Yeah,
sorry.
Robert Blake.
Sorry, Bobby. If you're listening, Bobby, I'm sorry. But I worked on that show as an assistant director for a while, and he came over to me one day and he said, Barnhart, I like what you're doing. I said, would you like to stay on the show? And I was only there temporarily. And I said, well, I don't know, Mr. Blake. I have an opportunity to go somewhere else. And I said, I want to direct. And he said, well, if you stay with me, I'll groom you to direct this show. And that was an hour series where if you worked an hour series as a director, you could move into movie in weeks. You have an opportunity to work, get into movies, films, which is what I wanted to do. But I was raising my son. He came to live with me. I was divorced, and my son came to live with me. And so the hours on the Beretta show were horrendous, 16, 18-hour days for an assistant director. It was just awful. But, it was good training. But the half-hour comedies were far less, and the weekends were pretty much off, aside from your preparation. So what happened was I told, let me think about it, Mr. Blake, let me think about it. He said, fine, tell me tomorrow. In the meantime, I had a call to do from a friend of mine who was the first assistant on Mork Mindy. Said, would you like to come with me and work on the Mork Mindy show? So I thought about it, and I thought about my responsibilities to my kid and so forth. So I went back to Blake the next day and I said, I'm sorry, Robert, I'm going to take to the show. And he said, what show is it? And I said, it's Mork and Mindy. And he looked at me and he said, Mork and Mindy? Who's in that? I said, well, there's a new comedian from San Francisco by the name of Robin Williams. He said, I never heard of Robin Williams. Who's Robin Williams? And he started making a big deal out of it. I said, well, I'm sorry, Bob, I'm going to go there. It's for my son, it's for myself, and so forth. And that was the fork in the road, David. And I teach that. I have a class here at CSN, college here, and I teach television and film productions. And I specify and I cover the acting, directing, writing, and even the editing of shows and etiquette and all the things that people need to know when they get their first jobs and whatever. Anyway, I teach the fork in the road business because that was a fork in the road. Yeah. And I chose to go with Robin Williams' Mork and Mindy show, and it worked out pretty well.
I think it did. I think it should be.
It did, David.
I think you should be very proud of your career and everything you worked on. And like I said in the last interview, I learned a lot watching you on Bell, and was very much inspired by what you did, and by the professionalism of that show, and not just that, but also just it was like I was on the new class, so we were kind of going through a lot of stuff that people had already seen from the original series, but at the same time it was still funny and fresh, and I think that's a testament to your work and to what you did on the show.
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. You're the interviewer, and I interrupted you. I apologize. You can cut this out if you can. But I had one story to tell you about the Bell show.
Yeah.
And if you don't mind me,
go ahead. Yeah.
Slipping back into that.
Yeah.
I worked. My partner here in town, Skip Burrows, and I have a movie company, and I written the script, and we were all prepared to do the same. But in the meantime, we picked up this little production, and we were going to go, and he was going to produce. I was directing, and we did this whole thing. And a cameraman came up to me one day, the first day of shooting, and he said, Don, well, actually, he said, Mr. Barnhart. He was very respectful. He could have said Don, but he said, Mr. Barnhart. I said, yes. He said, I wanted to thank you. I said, okay, for what? He said, you saved my life. I said, what? Excuse me? He said, I was hanging with the wrong crowd. I was out there. I was with guys in school that were dopers and bad guys, and I started watching the show. I turned it on one day, and there was Saved by the Bell, and I got kind of hooked on that show as opposed to being hooked on drugs. And I laughed kind of a bit because he made a little bit of a joke about it, but he said, you turned me around, you and the show, the characters and all that stuff, and I just wanted to thank you. I said, wow, Jesus, I appreciate you telling us that. That's the best story I've ever heard. about, people and drawn into that particular type of programming. So, it was nice. And he said, "I'll do the best job I can for you, sir." I said, "Well, I thank you. I appreciate that." And we went on.
That's really great to hear. I know the show influenced a lot of people and became kind of a. I look at the show as something of a national treasure now, with the way it was received by the audience and the couple generations that were really, were watching. Including mine, and how it impacted us.
I'm sorry I did it to you again.
It's okay.
I interrupted, cut you off. So I, slam the phone down if you want to. It's okay. But I even to this day, as we finished, I think I left the show. I think it was 1993 when I was a young man, and I left the show to come and write. I've written 4 novels, and I teach now, and I do little productions if it comes my way.
Yeah.
But I had, after all these years, from '93 until now, it's been just a wonderful experience, and I still get people to this day come up and say how much they appreciated the story. And we all know, it's kind of corny now because it's outdated, but we all know that the chemistry and the moral teachings and that sort of stuff and the humor was done very well.
Yeah.
And people remember it, and I was, thankful. I mean, people came up and to this day, I'd go to Starbucks and somebody will say, "That's the guy that directed Saved by the Bell," and these young kids. I mean, I say young, I'm up there in age, but these young people, just late teenagers, early 20s, and they come, we still watch the show.
Yeah.
And I go, it just floors me. I mean,
No, it's lasted.
I'm sorry?
It's lasted. It stood the test of time.
Well, that's what you said. It was, it was one of those things that it kind of shows, puts it up there with Cheers and a bunch of other shows. Even
I think
though
so.
The age difference is quite different, and our comedy is a little hipper on the older shows, the grown-up shows. But nevertheless, you live on the residuals. A lot of people got them, and I'm thankful. Every day I wake up saying, "Thank you, Lord."
Yeah, you actually left the show, I think, in 95, 96.
Well, whatever. Maybe.
Because those are the years I was on.
The residuals started in about 1993.
Okay.
Because they started replaying them as we
Right.
were doing the new class.
Yeah. The syndication's a wonderful thing. So, one of the people I didn't talk to you about last time, and I feel remiss because I'm still friends with him and talk to him once in a while, is Dennis Haskins. I love Dennis. I think he's a great guy, and I really enjoyed watching him work and his sense of humor and his sense of timing and his sense of abandon, having to do some of the really silly things that he'd often have to do, especially on the new class where things got very loud. There was a lot of physical comedy. What were your memories of working with Dennis and anything kind of fun to say or share, or just what were your thoughts on Dennis Haskins?
Well, I love Dennis. Dennis is one of the crazy good people in life. And I'll explain that in a few seconds. He was on my radio show. I was a talk jock here for a while. I did, 40-some-odd shows here on the KLAV here in Las Vegas. And I had my own hour program once a week. I dropped out of it because it's very difficult to get sponsors for some reason. But I did a show, and I had Dennis on as a guest at one time. We go back in the sense of he was there from day one to day end. He was there every show. And it's very sometimes difficult for actors to get, like say they have to dress him up as a woman. Well, every show, that every time you've seen every comedy, they always take the lead actors and make them into women actors. They dress them up with lipstick and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And a lot of actors can't handle it because it's just not in their training. Which is when I teach, I always say, actors, you've got to. That's why they have these actors that make you pretend to be a frog on the floor, or
right,
pretend to be a tree,
Yeah.
It's to break down your inhibitions. It's to break you so that when a real director on a real project says to you, to the actor, I want you to dress, we're going to dress you up as a woman this week. Building Dennis, he looked at me or he looked at somebody, and you could see his eyes roll back a bit, going, oh, well, it's my turn. And because they had Mark Paul Gosselaar and Zach and Slater, dress up as women on occasion. They had to date each other one time.
Right.
But Dennis jumped into it because he was an actor. And Dennis is one of those kind of guys that will maybe balk at something, like all actors will do, but he knows how to make that into his own character where he owns it, where he is a guy that has taken the character that they've asked him to do and portray and then make it his own. So that's why he never had a problem. It may be taking him a day or two to work it out in his head like all actors do, but he will come in and he'll be high heels and lipstick and, and all those kind of things. So whatever he did, just a pie in the face, nothing bothered him. And you had to respect that,
Yeah.
Dennis and I got along pretty well. We both kind of understood where we were going in the script, and he jumped into it, and I had comments that, it would be better if you looked over this way because I got to go to the camera on a close-up, and this is what I want to do. So when you leave, it'll work out continuity-wise and so forth. Oh, okay, Don, boom. And when he did the hey, that was mine. Actually, I gave that to him, but he didn't work. I just gave him an idea. I came in on rehearsal day one day. Something happened. I went, hey. And he picked up on it. And they started writing it in the script, and it became his own.
Yeah.
He started owning that particular little small piece of business, but it became something that people talk about and imitate when they see him. So,
yeah. Well, that's great. Well, thank you for taking some more time to talk to me and talk to the folks who are watching. And was there anything coming up that you want to mention or give a shout out to or a plug?
Well, the only plug I have is in the fall. One's coming up this month, September 18th. I start the 5-week film and production. I call it Director's Eye from my perspective. And what I do is I spend 3 hours each Saturday for 5 Saturdays, and I do it for nothing. I don't take a fee. A fee is offered, but I decided that I've had good fortune and it's time for a little give back. So I just go in there and do it for nothing, and they pay a fee. Participants, students, and go from there. I already had one in the springtime. It worked out pretty well. So I'm doing this a second semester for me.
Well, that's great. I'm glad you're giving back and teaching the next generation of folks. What you've learned and your experience over the years. I think it's really important to have that kind of lineage happening where people are passing on information. I think sometimes it gets lost with the way things are done now in terms of like apprenticeships and all that. It's kind of has changed. So it's nice that you're doing that because I think it's important so that people can learn from you and learn from your experience.
Well, like I say, I'm an old guy here, David, and I've been around the block more times than a moody meter maid. I parked in a few nefarious garages along the way. Been married a number of times. I've seen a lot of stuff. But the important thing is for the actor or the director, the writer, things that I can pass on to them that I've learned, which I truly hope it's not just fodder. I truly hope it's something that they could take with them. And especially the folks on the road is sort of subjects. My dog is barking. Jack, quiet, I'm on with David. So,
hey, Jack.
Come on, you're going to blow the interview. Jack, quiet. So, he answers. So we're like two old queens living in Las Vegas. My dog Jack, a high-end poodle, and me, a low-end old director. So there you go.
Well, thank you for talking with us, and best of luck on everything, and best of luck on the next workshop you're teaching.
Well, thank you, David. I appreciate your time.
All right, thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right, bye.
So I used to watch Don Barnhart work a lot. I would sneak off. I was really a nervous kid when I worked on Bell, and I would go in the hallway, and off the hallway behind all the sets, there's a stage door, then there's a hallway where all the dressing rooms are, and off of that hallway was the control room for the show, and in that room was where Don and all the ADs and all the producers would sit and watch all the monitors and call the shots. And if you've ever seen anybody working in these rooms, it's really like watching a symphony, because we had 4 or 5 cameras going at once. And Don would be sitting there and be snapping his fingers, take 1, ready, take 1, go, take 2, ready on 2, go, take 2, and snapping his fingers and calling the shots. And it was really impressive. And I would stand there in the doorway quietly watching, and anytime I could, I would be in that doorway watching them work and kind of taking it all in. And I learned a lot. I love television. It's my passion, and I hope to work as as the years go on even more. So really great to talk to him, and have a chance to hear from him some of his stories about Bell and about his career. I wanted to find some kind of job for the summer because I wasn't planning on going back home on the summer break. I was staying in Los Angeles, and a good friend of mine, Jim Keller, who I'll give a shout out to, he's a great friend, directed me in a play, Romeo and Juliet, and said, hey, you should sign up to be an extra at Central Cinex Casting. So I went down there and signed up with them, and one of the first auditions I got from them was for Saved by the Bell. And I got the part. I got the gig, and I got to be one of the regular high school extras for Saved by the Bell, the new class. Now, they didn't call us extras on Saved by the Bell. They called us Atmosphere. Yes, we were Atmosphere. We were like the oxygen in the room. But they made it important. They made it sort of important to them to have a regular set. And I was one of probably the regular 10, 15 extras that were brought back every single week, and they would bring in a few additional people when we needed to have larger scenes. But there was a core group of us that were on the show, and I was on 35 episodes of the show over 3 seasons. It was my summer job. I would school ended for me in May, so I would start on Saved by the Bell around April, May, and then I'd work through until August, and then in August I would leave the show. Yes, I actually left the show to go back to college and go to film school and finish my degree, because college is important. The producers were always really, really nice and let me do that. But I almost got fired from the show when my first season. So I was a kid. I was 19 when I got on the show, and I was an extra for a few weeks on the show. I was very excited to be there, and I was a fan of the show before I got on it. So it's a trip to walk into Bayside High and go like, oh, this is Bayside, and it was the same flats that they used, a lot of the same flats they used from the original series. So I remember. And by the way, here's a fun little story. On the back of those flats, it's a wall of bubble gum. It's gross, but it's bubble gum from all the principal cast. They would always chew gum, and then right before they had to go on stage, they would take the gum out of the mouth, put it on the flat, and walk on stage. And there was this big wall of gum. So, but when you look at the show, and you imagine what's right up out on the other side of that staircase, or right outside that doorway, it's a wall of gum. And some of the cast, like Tiffany Amber Thiessen, had circled hers and signed her gum, autographed her gum. It's kind of gross, but it was like a tradition on the show. I'm not a big gum fan myself, but it's kind of a weird, gross tidbit from Saved by the Bell. But I almost got fired. So it was I was an extra for a few weeks. I got the call that they wanted me to audition for a speaking part. And I was like, oh, that's great, because that happened once in a while. You were an extra, and they'd bump you up to a speaking part. So I go in to the audition, and it's for a red-headed waiter in the Max called Torch. Now, I was the only redhead on the show. And so I went into this audition thinking I had a pretty good shot. And there was only one other person auditioning with me, and he was like 30 and had barely any hair. He looked kind of bald, like I am now, and just had little wispy, barely red hair. So I thought I might have a shot at this. And I went into audition. Robin Lippin was the casting director. Now, Robin, if you're out there watching, hello, how you doing? Hope you're having a good day. And she was in this tiny little office. And I remember being it was really close. She was really close to me, 3 feet away from me, and telling me direction. And so I did it a few different ways. I didn't know what I was doing. I had no idea what I was doing back then. I had no idea what I was doing as an actor. I was scared of everyone. And I was scared of Robin. I shouldn't have been. There's no reason to be. She was a lovely lady. And then I got the part. I got the part, and I kind of felt that they might have actually written the part for me. I don't know if they did or not. But I felt they might have, maybe they did, because I was the only redhead on the show, and they wrote a part for a redheaded waiter, waiter in the Max, and I think I'd already done extra work as the waiter at that point. So I was really honored, and I thought it was great. But the problem is, so we shot the show on Fridays. On Thursdays, we rehearsed. We did a whole blocking rehearsal. We spent all day going through every scene. So Thursday went great. Friday comes. Now, I was really nervous about oversleeping. It was really important. I could barely sleep the night before. I was staying over at my girlfriend's house, or her apartment at USC, and I had my alarm clock set, her alarm clock, and her alarm clock baffled me. And I thought I had set it right, but I didn't. I overslept. I woke up at 8:30. My call time was like 8. And I called into the stage. I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. I can't believe I'm late. I'm so sorry. And they're like, get down here right away. They were mad, of course. And I got to NBC in like 20 minutes, record time from USC to NBC in Burbank. I got to the set, and Don Barnhart comes up to me. He's like, we almost fired you. And we almost got somebody else. And luckily my scene wasn't coming up until later in the day, so I apologized. And apparently Dennis Haskins vouched for me. I found out at the time that he had told the producers, like, listen, if David's not here, it's because something's happened. He's very responsible. It wouldn't be just because he's blowing it off. So I owe my career to Dennis Haskins for vouching for me and not getting me fired. So that's my Bell story. Is I almost got fired. I was on the show for 3 seasons. It's a great show. But it's this Lifetime movie. Okay, this Lifetime movie. So let's talk about this thing. I watched it. It was weird. It was trippy. It's, I think, the first time I've ever watched a biopic about people I actually know. And I'm not going to talk too much about it because it is what it is. And obviously Dustin Diamond is, from his point of view, I mean, he's distanced himself from it. I worked with Dustin for 3 years, and I liked him. I like Dustin. He's a nice guy. There's a good heart to him, but he was, a bit, blue once in a while, a little moody, not moody. I don't want to say moody because that sounds too negative, but I could see that he wasn't always happy with things. And so I can attest to the fact that people did take advantage of him. There was an extra on the new class that I really think, by the way, this extra that I'm talking about, who I'm not going to name, was the extra mentioned in the Lifetime movie, because I have a hard time believing the same thing happened to him twice. I never knew the details of what happened, so I don't know if the Lifetime movie is accurate or not. But there was an extra who he had become really close friends with, who then took advantage of him, and they had to take steps to not allow that guy to be on the set. So there is some truth to what Dustin is saying in that movie, if it's actually coming from him. But I really enjoyed working with Dustin and Dennis and everybody. They were great people, and they had a lot of fun. I mean, they did a lot of crazy stuff, a lot of slapstick, a lot of physical comedy, a lot of very broad comedy, and it's not always easy to do. And I think they did it great. So I loved working on the show, and it was a highlight of my youth, and like a second film school. Current events. So this iCloud hack. Guys, everyone out there, all the celebrities who might be listening, thank you for tuning in. If you're a celebrity listening, thank you. And if you're not a celebrity listening, thank you for tuning in, because we just need listeners. So thank you, everyone who's listening to this. But listen, there's no such thing as security on the internet. If you put it on the internet, it is not secure. I don't care what people are telling you. It's not 100% anyway. There's always some way to get to it. So if you don't want something to get distributed on the internet, do not put it on the internet. And iCloud and things like it are on the internet. They're not. If it's not on your physical desk, if it's not, like, see, I have a computer back here. It's got a hard drive inside it, right? And in that hard drive, I can control what goes into that hard drive. I can control who gets to that hard drive. But if I had that hard drive sitting on a server at Apple or something in an iCloud, I don't have any control over that. I don't have control over the security. Someone would have to break into my home and hack into my system, or hack in through my network to get to my computer. And that would require it to be online. And it's actually not online right now, because I don't keep it online unless I'm going online. So J-Law, Jennifer Lawrence, I think you're fantastic. You're wonderful. You're a fantastic actress. And I love that you brought down the law on these hackers, because you're J-Law, and why wouldn't you? But don't put anything on iCloud that you don't want other people to see. Just don't. Don't put anything on your cell phone that you don't want other people to see. Don't. So stop the nude pictures, unless you really want to go in that direction, in which case you can probably make a pretty good career. So what am I watching? What am I streaming? What's going through my router into my computer and playing on a player? I watch a lot of streaming content. I predominantly watch streaming content on my laptop or on iTunes or even on demand. That's a kind of a form of streaming. It's not always streaming because it's downloading to your set-top box. But hey, I watch a lot of content that is not live, is what I'm saying. I love this era we're in, where we can watch what we want to watch when we want to watch it, and darn it, we're going to do it when we want to do it, not when the networks want us to do it. So that's kind of cool. So what am I watching right now? Well, I've been watching and catching up on Party Down, this old comics, Comedy Central or IFC. I'm not sure what the network it originally aired on, but it's a great show about a bunch of actors working as caterers to events, and it stars some great people. People like Jane Lynch are in it, and a lot of cool folks. So one of the leads went on to work on Masters of Sex. It's streaming right now on Hulu. I also have been catching up on old and new Doctor Who, especially old Doctor Who from the first series. I'm a huge Whovian. If you can't tell, that's a Tom Baker scarf behind me, and of course I would be remiss not to mention that I always make sure I have my Sonic around. So I've been catching up on old episodes of Who that I missed. I've been a Who fan since I was a kid. I watched a lot of the old episodes on PBS back in the 80s. Peter Davison was kind of my first Doctor, along with Tom Baker. But I've been watching some of the other Doctors, like Colin Baker and Pertwee, and all of them. And it's been a lot of fun catching up. It's funny is those shows, they're very of a different era. The pacing is different, the costumes are different, the music is different, but once you get past that, you can get lost in a great show, and I think it's awesome that they've been able to keep it going for 50 years. It's amazing. I've been watching some of the newer episodes. I've just caught up on or rewatched the Eccleston season of Doctor Who, the season that really relaunched all of Who. Dang, when I first watched it, I didn't dig it because he was wearing the leather jacket and he was too modern, and I don't know, I didn't like the way he was dressed. That's a horrible reason not to like a show, but I was kind of disappointed, and I had such a love of the old show that I didn't want to let go of that image in my head of Who. But once I was able to get past that, just recently, and started watching the old Eccleston episodes. He's really good. I really liked his Doctor. I stand corrected. He was amazing. He was fantastic. So I've been watching that. This fall, I'm looking forward to Blacklist Season 2. I love watching James Spader, and I think it's a really weird show. I dig it. I dig it. It's just something about him that I can watch him read the phone book. And if that was the series was, I would probably watch it. I'm also looking forward to seeing what happens with the second season of S.H.I.E.L.D., Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. It had a rough start last season. I think they rushed into it a bit. But towards the end of the season, they started really finding the show and finding the momentum and getting a lot more interesting people on the series, getting more superheroes. There was a lack of superheroes. I would watch S.H.I.E.L.D. and I would be reminded of the Jurassic Park. Jurassic Park, I know that's a weird parallel, but where Jeff Goldblum's going through the park and going, hey, there's no dinosaurs showing up, and he's like, there are dinosaurs on your dinosaur ride, right? And I kept thinking, there are superheroes on your superhero show of S.H.I.E.L.D., not just the one. So it was nice to see them kind of expand, and I love how, I think it's the first time in television history where you have a television show that's working in parallel with a feature film series of releases. So what happens in Thor: The Dark World affects what happens on S.H.I.E.L.D., and that was kind of cool to see that happen. So I'm excited to see what they do with Season 2, and I'm hoping they find their footing and really start just giving us some great entertainment. What I just watched recently was Selfie. This new show with Karen Gillan from Doctor Who. Although her doctor actually used a different sonic screwdriver. This one, right here. Yeah. So she's on Selfie with John Cho, and they have great chemistry. I watched the pilot; they have great chemistry, but I think 22 minutes is a little short for what they're trying to do. But I'm curious to see where it goes because they're a lot of fun to watch. I think it's a lot of fun. So that's what I'm watching. That's what I'm streaming. That's what I'm looking forward to this fall. Let me know what you're streaming and looking forward to as well, and feel free to send in your thoughts to us here at Streaming and Screaming. And thank you for watching. This has been Streaming and Screaming. I'm David P. Cronmiller. Check out, by the way, my other show, I Went to Film School So You Don't Have to, at iwenttofilmschool.com. And I'm also the writer, director, producer of a show called Ann Boris. You can find at YouTube/Ann Boris. ANDBORIS, stars the great J. Anthony McCarthy, and guest stars people like TJ Storm, who's going to be coming up here and talking with us soon here at Streaming and Screaming, along with some really great actors. We have people like Todd Stashwick and Amy Collegato, along with the regular cast of J. Anthony McCarthy, Michael Proctor, Sarah Barton, Jennifer Emily McLean, who's my wife, Brenda McNamara. All these people are great on the show, so watch that too. I'm David P. Cronmiller. Thank you, and keep watching, keep tuning in here at KXSR Excite Radio. Bye! Bye, everyone.